Hello, my dearest listeners, and welcome back to the Penumbra Files. Tonight, we pull a file on a case that reminds us that the most terrifying monsters are not those who lurk in the shadows, but those who walk among us in the light, their faces hidden by the most convincing of masks: respectability. This is a story about a city held captive by a ghost, and the one detective who dared to look behind the mask. Before we begin, a sincere thank you for joining me in these explorations of the dark. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive into the human psyche, please consider subscribing to the channel and enabling notifications. Your support is what allows me to keep opening these files. Now take a breath and clear your mind. We are about to enter the city of Viridia and meet the artist of death known only as the Collector. Detective Eva Rostova believed that every crime scene was a story, and every killer a failed author. They tried to write a narrative of power, or revenge, or greed, but they always left behind typesmudges of evidence, inconsistencies, moments where their true, pathetic nature bled through the ink. Her job was to be the world's most ruthless editor. But the scene in front of her was no mere story. It was a perfectly staged, flawlessly executed theatrical performance. The victim was Sterling Thorne, a man whose name was synonymous with corporate raiding and hostile takeovers. He lay in the center of his penthouse office, a sterile expanse of glass and chrome overlooking the glittering, indifferent sprawl of Viridia. He was dressed in an immaculate tuxedo, seated on a single ornate Baroque chair that was utterly out of place amidst the stark modernism. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening to a distant melody. And on his face, perfectly fitted, was a pristine, white porcelain mask, the kind used in classical Venetian carnivals, blank, emotionless, and utterly terrifying. The cause of death was a single, precise puncture wound to the heart, so fine it was almost invisible. There was no blood, save for a small, dark stain on his starched white shirt, hidden by his jacket. The office was hermetically clean. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no footprints, no stray fibers. The killer had moved through this high-security fortress like a ghost. "It's a statement," said her partner, Detective Jack Morrison, a man whose weary cynicism was a comfort to Eva's own restless intensity. "But what the hell is it saying?" Eva circled the scene, her sharp, pale blue eyes missing nothing. She had learned this focus as a child in a country that no longer existed, a place where survival depended on noticing the subtle shift in a bureaucrat's expression, the unspoken threat in a neighbor's greeting. She saw things other people missed. "It's not just a statement," she said, her voice a low murmur. "It's a judgment. Look at him." Thorne was a brute, a shark in a tailored suit. He ruined thousands of lives and called it business. The killer has dressed him up, made him a gentleman. He's been forced into a costume of civility. She pointed to the mask. And this erases him. It takes away his identity, the face he used to intimidate and command. The killer is saying, behind your mask of power, you are nothing. The media, predictably, had a field day. They christened the killer the Collector, a name that was both chilling and annoyingly inaccurate in Eva's opinion. He wasn't collecting victims, he was curating effigies. The investigation quickly devolved into a series of frustrating dead ends. Sterling Thorne had more enemies than the plague. The list of potential suspects was a phone book of the city's wronged and ruined. They interviewed dozens disgruntled employees, bankrupted rivals, betrayed spouses, but each had an alibi, a story that checked out. The Collector had left them a forest of suspects, but no path. Days turned into a week, and the pressure from the top brass and the mayor's office became immense. Viridia was a city that prided itself on its polished veneer, and a theatrical serial killer was a particularly ugly stain. The chief, a man named Patterson who valued good press over good police work, decided they needed a new angle. "We're bringing in a consultant," he announced in a morning briefing, his face grim. "A psychological profiler. He's the best in the country. Wrote the book on this kind of ritualistic pathology." Eva bristled. She had little use for profilers who offered vague, untestable theories. She believed in evidence, in the typos the killer left behind. His name, Patterson continued, is Dr. Alastair Finch. The name silenced the room. Dr. Finch wasn't just a profiler. He was a local saint, a renowned child psychologist, a best-selling author of books on empathy and healing, and a philanthropist whose Finch Foundation had revitalized the city's poorest neighborhoods. He was a man with a serene smile and a reputation as spotless as the mask on Sterling Thorne's face. Dr. Finch arrived at the precinct the next day, and he was exactly as his public persona suggested. Tall, impeccably dressed in a soft tweed jacket, with kind, intelligent eyes and a calm, reassuring voice that could soothe a cornered animal. He listened patiently as Eva and Jack walked him through the case file, his brow furrowed in thoughtful concern. "This is not a man who kills for pleasure," Dr. Finch said, his voice a gentle baritone as he studied the crime scene photos. The precision, the lack of rage. It suggests a powerful sense of purpose. He believes he is a purveyor of a specific kind of justice. He's not a sadist, he's a moralist. A deeply, dangerously disturbed moralist. Eva found herself unnerved by him. He was too calm, his insights too perfectly articulated. As he spoke, she felt a strange, dissonant hum beneath his words, a feeling she couldn't place. It was like listening to a flawless recording of a symphony perfect in its execution, but lacking the messy, unpredictable soul of a live performance. "He will have a public face of unimpeachable character," Finch continued, looking directly at Eva. "The grandiosity of his crimes suggests a deep-seated need to compensate for a perceived powerlessness in his own life. He is likely someone who feels invisible, overlooked." That night, the collector struck again. The victim was Genevieve Vale, a society fundraiser and the city's self-appointed queen of charity galas. She was found in the pristine, white marble foyer of her mansion. The scene was another chilling tableau. She was dressed in a simple, nun-like habit, her hands clasped around a single wilted daisy. On her face was another Venetian mask, this one a Columbina, a delicate half-mask decorated with gold leaf and a single peacock feather. Eva stood in the cold, echoing foyer and felt a wave of nausea. Genevieve Vale's charity work was a well-known secret to be a front for a high-class blackmail operation. She collected the city's dirty secrets and leveraged them for donations. "Another judgment," Jack muttered, shaking his head. "The killer has stripped her of her glamour," Eva observed, "forced her into a costume of piety. He's exposing the hypocrisy." The next day, Dr. Finch joined them at the crime scene. He walked through the foyer with a somber air, his gaze taking in every detail. He seemed genuinely saddened by the tragedy. "The pattern is solidifying," he said softly. "He targets those who live behind a public mask. Thorne, the titan of industry who was a predator. Vale, the philanthropist who was an extortionist. The collector sees himself as an unmasker of truths." He turned to Eva, his eyes filled with a thoughtful intensity. "To catch him, you must understand him, detective. You must learn to see the world as he deals a grand, corrupt masquerade ball." Eva felt that strange hum again, stronger this time. It was in the way he looked at her, an unnerving sense of being seen, of being analyzed. She was the investigator, but she felt like the one under the microscope. Later that week, Eva was working late, poring over the case files, when a thought struck her. The masks. They were specific types. The one on Thorne was a larva, a simple, stark white mask. The one on Vale was a Columbina. They weren't random. She spent hours researching the history of the Commedia dell'arte, the Italian theatrical tradition from which the masks originated. The larva mask was often worn by characters who were specters or ghosts, figures representing a truth from beyond the grave. The Columbina was worn by the clever, often duplicitous servant who was smarter than her masters. The masks weren't just disguises. They were characters, roles assigned to the victims in their final performance. The killer was a scholar of his craft. She presented her findings to Finch in their next meeting. He was impressed, a genuine spark of academic delight in his eyes. "Brilliant detective," he praised. "Truly brilliant. You see, you are beginning to think like him." This suggests our killer is a man of culture, of intellect. He is not just killing them. He is recasting them in a drama of his own creation. During the conversation, Finch's phone rang. He apologized and answered it, his voice shifting to one of deep, paternal concern. Of course, I can see him now. No, it's no trouble at all. Bring the boy in. We'll find a way to help him. He hung up and gave Eva a sad smile. A troubled child. So many masks they wear to hide the pain. The phrase hung in the air between them. So many masks they wear. That night, Eva couldn't sleep. The case was a labyrinth and Dr. Finch was her guide. But she felt a growing, irrational sense of dread. She kept replaying their conversations in her head. His insights were always perfect, his logic unassailable. He was a man who understood the killer's mind intimately. Too intimately. She got out of bed and pulled up Dr. Alistair Finch's public profile on her laptop. The glowing biography, the list of awards, the photos of him smiling with underprivileged children. A saint. A man who healed, who helped. A man who spent his life helping people take off their masks of pain. Her blood ran cold. It was an insane, impossible thought. A leap of logic so vast it was suicidal for a cop who lived on evidence. But she couldn't shake it. She looked at the picture of the smiling, benevolent doctor, and for the first time, she didn't see a healer. She saw the most perfect, the most impenetrable mask she had ever encountered. And she knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that her real investigation had just begun. She wasn't just hunting a killer anymore. She was trying to unmask a god. The suspicion, once it took root, was a poison. Colored every interaction, every piece of evidence. Dr. Alistair Finch, the city's beloved philanthropist, the brilliant mind guiding their investigation, was the collector. It was a theory so monstrous, so utterly devoid of proof, that Eva knew she couldn't breathe a word of it to anyone, not even Jack. They would think she was cracking under the pressure. Her career, already on thin ice with Chief Patterson, would be over. She had to proceed with the surgical precision of a bomb disposal expert. One wrong move, one hint of her suspicion, and Finch, if he was the killer, would know. He would retreat behind his impenetrable mask of respectability, and she would never get close again. She had to maintain the facade of the grateful, diligent detective, all while secretly investigating the man who was supposed to be her greatest asset. Her official investigation continued on its fruitless path. The team chased down leads related to Vale's blackmail victims, all of which led to alibis and dead ends. In her meetings, Eva played her part, listening intently to Dr. Finch's analyses, even offering her own theories for him to dissect. The psychological chess match was exhausting. She felt his intellect probing hers, testing her, and she had to carefully manage every word, every expression. "You seem tired, detective," he noted one afternoon in the incident room, his voice laced with concern. "This case is taking its toll. You must not let the darkness of his world seep into your own." The irony was so thick she felt she could choke on it. Privately, Eva's real investigation began. It was a lonely, clandestine effort conducted in the dead of night. She started with Finch's public life, looking for a crack, however small, in the porcelain perfection. She read his books not for their psychological insights, but for a glimpse of the author's soul. They were brilliant, empathetic, and full of compassionate wisdom. But as she read, she noticed a recurring theme. The celebration of brutal honesty, the idea that true healing could only come from stripping away all social niceties, all the little white lies that hold society together. He wrote about it with an almost religious fervor. It was the philosophy of the collector, hidden in plain sight, disguised as self-help. She dug into his past. Alistair Finch was an orphan, a fact he used to great effect in his public narrative. He had triumphed over a tragic childhood, pulling himself up by his bootstraps. He was a symbol of hope. Eva obtained the sealed juvenile records, calling in a favor from a judge she'd helped years ago. The files were thin. He grew up at the St. Jude's Home for Boys, an institution that had burned to the ground in a tragic fire 25 years ago. Several children and a staff member had perished. Alistair, then a teenager, was lauded as a hero, credited with saving several younger boys by leading them through the smoke. The official report listed the cause of the fire as faulty wiring. Case closed. But Eva had learned that cases were never truly closed. She found the name of the lead fire marshal on the report, a man named Henderson, now retired and living in a fishing town up the coast. She drove up on her day off, finding him on a windswept pier, his face a leathery testament to a life spent in the sun and salt. He remembered the fire. He remembered it with a discomfort that hadn't faded in a quarter of a century. That fire was never right, Henderson told her, his eyes on the gray horizon. The wiring was old, sure, but the blaze spread too fast, too hot. There were accelerants, I'm sure of it, but we could never prove it. And the political pressure to close the case. St. Jude's was a black eye for the city. They wanted it gone, forgotten. He remembered Alistair. The hero boy, he said with a cynical grunt. He was too calm. I interviewed him the day after. He'd just seen his home burn down, his friends die. And he was dissecting it, talking about the fire's behavior, the panic of the other kids, like he was a scientist observing an experiment. No tears, no shock. Just analysis. It creeped me out. This was the first crack. A significant one. On the drive back to Viridia, Eva felt a cold certainty solidifying in her gut. Meanwhile, the collector claimed a third victim. This time, it was a prominent defense attorney, Marcus Thorne, known for getting guilty, high-profile clients acquitted on technicalities. He was found in his own law library, slumped over a rare legal text. He was dressed in the black and white striped uniform of a prisoner, and on his face was the mask of Il Dottore, the Doctora character from the Commedia dell'arte who was a pompous, fraudulent intellectual. The message was the clearest yet. The purveyor of false justice was now judged. The city went into a full-blown panic. The pressure on the department was immense. In the emergency briefing, Dr. Finch was the picture of calm authority. He is accelerating, Finch told the assembled, terrified detectives. His confidence is growing. The mask of the doctor is significant. He is mocking the systems of authority, first commerce, then society, now the law. He sees them all as fraudulent. He may even see us as fraudulent, as part of the broken system. His eyes met Eva's across the room, and for a split second, she was sure she saw a flicker of something triumphant in their depths. Eva knew she needed more than a retired fire marshal's gut feeling. She started looking for survivors of the St. Jude's fire, cross-referencing names from the old records. Most had scattered, their lives a testament to the trauma they had endured. But she found one. A man named Daniel, living on the margins of society, a recovering addict who worked as a night janitor. It took her 3 visits to his squalid apartment before he would talk. The ghosts of St. Jude's still had a firm grip on him. Alistair wasn't a hero, Daniel whispered, his eyes darting around the room as if the ghosts were listening. He was the king of that place. He had this way about him. He could get inside your head. He knew everyone's secrets. He'd organized these truth circles in the boiler room. You had to confess your worst secret, the thing you were most ashamed of. If you refused, or if he thought you were lying, he'd punish you. He'd turn the other boys against you. It was psychological torture. Eva's blood ran cold. The collector's MO wasn't new. It was a refined, deadlier version of a game a disturbed teenager had played years ago. The fire, Eva said, her voice barely a whisper. What do you know about the fire? Daniel started to tremble. There was a boy, Michael. He was Alistair's only real friend, his disciple. But Michael found out something. Something Alistair had done to one of the younger boys. Something terrible. Michael was a good kid. He was going to tell the administrator. The night before he was going to talk. The fire happened. Michael's room was where it started. They said it was an accident. But we all knew. Alistair started the fire to silence him. To erase his own sin. He was the first person Alistair unmasked. This was it. The genesis of the monster. The fire was his first and most successful cover-up. He hadn't just hidden his crime. He had transformed himself into a hero in the process. It was the birth of the mask. Eva felt a sickening wave of vertigo. She was hunting a man who had been perfecting his craft for 25 years. She had no physical evidence, only the testimony of a traumatized, unreliable witness against one of the most beloved figures in the city. She decided to take a desperate gamble. She couldn't confront Finch directly, but she could unnerve him. In their next official meeting, while discussing the psychology of the collector, she brought up the St. Jude's fire. "I was looking at cold cases," she said, her tone deliberately casual, "and I was struck by the parallels between the fire at St. Jude's and our killer. A catastrophic event that erases a problem. A narrative of heroism that hides a darker truth. It's an interesting psychological prototype, isn't it?" She watched him. For the first time since she had met him, Alistair Finch's serene composure faltered. It was almost imperceptibly a slight tightening of the muscles around his eyes, a momentary pause that was a fraction of a second too long. But Eva, the student of tells, saw it. It was the tiniest crack in the porcelain, but it was enough. He knew that she knew. The game had changed. He was no longer her guide. He was her adversary. And he knew that the detective he'd been so carefully manipulating was now a mortal threat to the perfect world he had built. The mask was still in place, but for the first time, the monster behind it was looking right at her. The moment the words about the St. Jude's fire left her lips, Eva knew the carefully balanced game of cat and mouse was over. She had shown her hand. The flicker in Dr. Finch's eyes was not just acknowledgement. It was a promise. The hunter had just become the hunted. A new kind of fear settled over her, cold and sharp. This was no longer an intellectual exercise. Finch was not a distant subject of investigation. He was a direct threat. He knew she was digging into his past. He knew she was close to the truth that he had buried under a lifetime of good deeds and a mountain of corpses. She started carrying her off-duty weapon at all times. She checked her car for tracking devices. Every friendly face on the street seemed like a potential mask. Finch, for his part, played his role to perfection. In their next meeting, he was even more solicitous, more concerned for her well-being. "Detective, I am worried about you," he said, his voice a silken trap of compassion. "Your obsession with this case, this prototype theory, is a classic sign of investigator transference. You're starting to identify too closely with the killer's mindset. Perhaps you should take some time off." It was a brilliant move, a poison dart wrapped in concern. He was preemptively discrediting her, painting her as unstable to her superiors. Chief Patterson, already wary of Eva's unorthodox methods, bought it completely. "Rostova, Finch is right," he'd barked at her later. "You're too close. Leave the profiling to the expert and stick to the evidence. And stay the hell away from Dr. Finch's past. Is that clear?" She was isolated. Jack was the only one who halfway believed her. "It's a hell of a theory, Eva," he'd said, his face etched with worry. "But all we have is the word of a junkie and a gut feeling. It's not enough to take down a saint." Eva knew she couldn't find evidence of his past crimes. The trail was too cold, buried under a fire and 25 years of calculated deception. She had to catch him in the act of being the collector. She had to force him to make a mistake. And to do that, she had to become a target he couldn't resist. The collector's victims were all hypocrites, people whose public masks hid a rotten core. Eva would have to become one. With Jack's reluctant help, she began to stage her own hypocrisy. They fabricated a file, a piece of evidence suggesting that Eva had once tampered with a crime scene to convict a man she knew was guilty but couldn't prove it. A man who had later been exonerated. It was the ultimate sin for a detective, a perversion of the very justice she claimed to uphold. They knew Finch, with his vast network and likely surveillance on her, would discover it. They created a mask for Eva, the righteous cop who secretly played judge, jury, and executioner. It was a terrifying gamble. She was painting a target on her own back, inviting a monster into her life. Within a week, she knew he had taken the bait. The subtle signs began. A single, pristine white feather like the one on the Columbina mask left on the windshield of her car. a book on Venetian history anonymously delivered to her apartment. They were his calling cards, the overture to his next performance. He was toying with her, letting her know he was coming. The final message came in the form of a package. Inside was a beautiful, handcrafted wooden box. When she opened it, she found a single, perfect porcelain mask nestled on a bed of black velvet. It was a Moretta Masca strapless, oval mask that was held in place by a button clenched in the teeth, rendering the wearer silent. It was a mask historically worn only by women. Tucked beneath it was a note, written in elegant, calligraphic script. The time has come for all masks to fall. The final performance awaits. The Finch Foundation Children's Theater. Midnight. This was it. He was inviting her to her own execution, on a stage of his own choosing. The Finch Foundation Children's Theater was one of his philanthropic masterpieces, a beautifully restored Art Deco theater where he hosted free performances for the city's underprivileged youth. It was a symbol of his benevolence, the perfect stage for his final act of justice. Eva and Jack planned it meticulously. A full SWAT team would be in place, hidden in the shadows on the rooftops in the alleyways. But Eva knew she had to go in alone. Finch wouldn't show himself if he sensed a trap. The unmasking had to be a personal, intimate affair between the two of them. At 5 minutes to midnight, she walked into the theater. It was empty and silent, the only light coming from a single spectral ghost light on the center of the stage. The air was thick with the smell of dust and anticipation. "I knew you would come, detective," a voice echoed from the darkness of the mezzanine. Dr. Alastair Finch stepped into the dim light. He was no longer the compassionate doctor. He was dressed in a simple, dark outfit, but his posture, his presence had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling, absolute authority. The mask of kindness had been discarded. "You are my greatest disappointment, Eva," he said, his voice resonating through the empty hall. "I truly thought you were different, a seeker of truth. But you are just like the others. You hide behind a mask of righteousness, while your own sins fester beneath." "There are no sins," Eva said, her voice steady, her hand resting near the butt of her gun. "Only a trap, and you walked right into it." A slow, cold smile spread across his face. "Oh, I think not." Suddenly, the main stage lights flashed on, blinding her. On the stage was a tableau. A figure was tied to a chair, a bag over their head. Eva's heart stopped. It was Jack. "Every performance needs a captive audience," Finch said, his voice silky smooth. "I knew you wouldn't come alone. I've been watching your partner for days. He was so easy to take." The trap had been turned. She was caught. "What do you want, Alastair?" she asked, her mind racing, trying to find a new way out, a new move on the board. "What I have always wanted," he said, walking down the grand staircase towards her. "Truth, purity. I am not a murderer, detective. I am a healer. I cleansed this city of its diseases. Sterling Thorn, Genevieve Vale. They were cancers. I simply excised them. I forced them to see the ugliness behind their own masks before I grant them the release of an honest death." He was on the main floor now, circling her. "I was a boy when I discovered my purpose. St. Jude's, place full of lies. I learned that the only way to make people honest is to hold a fire to their feet. Michael, he was my first true success. He died with the truth on his lips. You're a child who never grew up." Eva shot back, her voice laced with the contempt she truly felt. "You're not a healer. You're a bully who gets to play God, because you were never held accountable for your crimes." His eyes flashed with rage. It was the first genuine, uncontrolled emotion she had seen from him. "You dare!" He lunged. He was faster and stronger than his academic demeanor suggested. He disarmed her with brutal efficiency, the gun clattering across the marble floor. He forced her towards the stage, towards Jack. This was his endgame. He would force her to confess her sins, and then execute her, leaving her and Jack to be found in another one of his ghastly performances. As he shoved her up the stage steps, Eva knew she had one last card to play. It wasn't a weapon. It was a word. You're wrong about Michael, she said, breathing heavily. He wasn't your success. He was your failure. Finch froze, his hand tight on her arm. What did you say? I spoke to Daniel, she bluffed, praying the name held power. He told me Michael wasn't going to confess. He was going to expose you. He wasn't afraid of your truth circle. He saw you for what you were. A scared, pathetic little boy playing games. He rejected you. That's why you killed him. Not for truth, but because your ego couldn't handle it. The words hit him like a physical blow. His entire philosophy, his life's work, was built on the foundation of that first successful unmasking. She had just taken a sledgehammer to it. His face contorted, the handsome, intelligent features twisting into a mask of pure, primal rage. The cool, calculating collector was gone, replaced by the furious child from the boiler room. Liar, he screamed. In that moment of blind fury, he was no longer a genius. He was just a thug. He raised his hand to strike her, and in that split second of distraction, Jack, who had been working his hands free, lunged, chair and all, knocking Finch off balance. Eva didn't hesitate. She drove her elbow into Finch's side, breaking free. The SWAT team, hearing the scream, chose that moment to storm the theater, crashing through the doors, their laser sights painting the stage in a dozen red dots. Finch looked around, cornered, his beautiful, ordered world collapsing into chaos. He looked at Eva, his eyes filled with a hatred that was absolute. Then, he looked at a stage prop, a heavy, ornamental dagger from a Shakespeare play. He chose to write his own final act. He snatched the dagger and plunged it into his own chest before anyone could reach him. He collapsed onto the stage, a final, dramatic flourish. He died with a faint, ironic smile on his lips, the ultimate performer taking his final bow. In the aftermath, the city was in shock. The unmasking of Alistair Finch was a story that would be told for generations. Eva Rostova was hailed as a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She felt as though she had stared into an abyss so profound it had stared back and left a permanent shadow on her soul. Weeks later, she stood in her apartment, looking at her own reflection in the window. She had won. The monster was dead. But she knew that the masks were still out there, on every street, in every office, in every home. And she understood, with a chilling certainty, that her work as an editor of humanity's dark stories was far from over.